I guess I'm the one to introduce. I've never been in this position before, so excuse me if you think it's not very interesting. Well, actually, we were just debating who would show up at 10 in the morning, and we were afraid we'll come out into an empty room. And so first of all, thanks everyone for coming to what I think will be a very interesting or different conversation, if not because it's a first time I'm being a moderator. When I got the invitation, I sent back to the Basel people and say, like, I don't want to be in this role. And then Anurag is the one who kind of, encouraged me to try it out. So
exactly. I ensured that he does it because it was first time for him, and we've had these conversations before, and an informal setup is always very nice. And it's very, very nice to see quite a few people here because I have my wife and children sitting here, and they always think I'm a nutcase who keeps living with art and thinking about art all the time. So I go home with a lot of respect. Thank you so much.
So now you see many nuts here, at least 4 sitting here. First of all, I introduce myself. I'm William Lim. I'm an architect in profession, artist in hobby, and then also a collector in hobby. And next to me, Phillip, maybe I will just have everyone introduce themselves because I haven't really done too much homework myself. So, Phillip, would you mind?
Yeah, I'm originally a performer and a theatre person. Then I became a magazine publisher. And now I'm chair of the Biennale of Sydney, and I also run an arts foundation called the Keir Foundation.
I'm Alan Lau. I'm a management consultant in my day job, and on the art side, actually is involved with William on a couple of similar organizations. We're both in Parasite, and I hope you had a chance to visit Parasite in Hong Kong. We're the oldest contemporary art space, and I'm the co-chair of that, and sit on a couple of the international committee of other art institutions like the Tate.
My name is Anurag. I have a small business back in India. I'm a struggling collector. That's exactly what I would like to say. Struggling forever, pushing other people to collect. Struggling and very, very inquisitive as a collector. I don't have a family history of collecting art. It's very new to us. It's a disease. I have it. I admit it. And I keep pushing others who I still think are not doing enough, looking and considering art. So it's always a pleasure that people who are not financially at a point where art is something that they would want to consider to live with. I'm always very happy pushing people there, saying that look at this as well. It's as good as doing anything else in life. It's a good way of living. It's as simple as that.
Maybe can I just start with asking Anurag, how did you...
Why do you want to hit me first?
Well, because you're the furthest away. So, how did you get into collecting, and at what age, if you don't mind?
I was about 27, 28, getting married. My wife, we were getting a new bride home, so we wanted to do up the house really well so that she can be really happy. So I just landed up in Bombay at 2 galleries and just bought something at that time. Indian art was, especially the contemporary artists, they were there, but it wasn't going that crazy anytime soon. So when we got the things home, and it's always with Indian weddings, they're always flashy and big, and then after that you have all the time dinners happening at home. So we had lots and lots of friends who were coming home all the time, and there were always questions: what is this? Where do you get it from? What's this thing trying to do? That made me very inquisitive. So and then after that it was all about, slowly and gradually from that on, it became more and more, I would say, more into sort of serious reading, understanding, traveling, looking at art, asking questions. It's non-stop. So, that's where the dive-in happened. I dived into like a well and then sort of tried to somehow move out of it. And I'm still struggling because it just never happens. You always think that, this year you've studied enough, you've understood enough, you've seen enough. And I'm like, oh God, there's still so much to see, so much to learn. That's how it is. It's like a whole ocean,
Alan, did you ever feel like you dove into a well? And
Oh, absolutely. I think I started a few years after you did, but with the same idea. I mean, not that I get married, but it's about decorating. It's I just moved into a new office, and I had a wall to fill up. So that's when I started looking for art, and just being a curious person, sort of naturally look and research more into it, and just find it fascinating. And yeah, so sometimes I do feel like it is a disease, right?
It is, and now that's how organically it grows on you, that I started looking at collecting video and video art. In a city where I live, there's not even a single framer. There's not a single framer in the city. So, when you have projecting video art in your office space, because we designed an office which has their own shows now, there's no time frame, there's no fixed pattern, because I don't want to pressurize myself to collecting that every 1 year a new show has to come up. It has to organically grow with time. So whenever we have it, our lounge has videos playing. People who come in who've never seen art in their life before, they come and ask questions. What the hell is this? It's very interesting to start explaining things. It's like a way of nurturing other people to what you're doing and enjoying yourself with. And it found its own place. I started looking and collecting video art in India when people weren't even considering video as an art form. And I collected, and they're like, what the hell are you going to do with this? You live in a city where there's no museum, there's nothing like that. You'll never be able to exhibit it. I'm like, I don't care. It'll find its own place. And it's happened, it's find my office space. I know one day it'll find somewhere else. It'll travel somewhere or the other. It will, I'm sure.
So, Phillip, it seems like we have two very irrational person, and including myself. But you have the role as being the chairman of the Sydney Biennial while you're still being a collector. So how do you have that irrational or sporadic side of you that kind of you have to be more rational about?
No. I think collecting is a bit like a journey. So you tend to start somewhere, and so my earliest collecting was really just because I was friends with artists, and that's when I was an artist myself, I guess. So that was the first stage, if you like. And then as I lived in various places abroad, like New York and London, I guess I got to know other artist communities. So one thing led to another, and I guess the Biennale of Sydney in my history, is a relatively more recent thing. So I think in the end, though, Biennales do have a big impact on collecting, and they certainly have had a big impact on my approach to collecting, because I think they develop a certain kind of material, and I'm often very attracted to the kind of work that appears at Biennales, and I have often subsequently bought work from Biennales, yeah.
Do you think the fact that many galleries are involved in Biennales and then eventually those works are sellable, do you think that helped help collectors or help the art scene, or do you think it kind of make it more complicated?
I think it probably does make it more complicated sometimes, and obviously there are, I guess, questions of ethics sometimes as well as to how work is put together. But I guess what I'm attracted to again about what artists do for Biennales is that they sometimes suspend themselves a bit from the market, and that's what sometimes I find attractive. Now, obviously, it's a grey area. There is no, absolutely, the market does have an impact on how Biennales are put together. It does, absolutely, and vice versa, I hope.
I would like to add to this. It's a big grey area that what he's talking about is so true, but I think it's very, very essential. In a way, if you see, how are we going to help the artists to survive? It's not going to be commercially viable for them to keep making art. So I think the whole transition of fairs and then overlaps of biennales and all these non-profit and profit and business and non-business institutions that sort of are overlapping with each other. There's no other way out. I know some things go beyond to an extent that they become ugly, but I don't think there's a way out. It has to be like this.
Yeah. Actually, Kochi, I just heard from Anurag this Kochi Biennial. That seems to be fantastic. It will be on for another 2 weeks, and I'm almost tempted to buy a ticket right away and go see it. Tell us a little bit about how a Biennale like that could actually change the scene of perception of art in a place like India.
In lots and lots of ways, because Kochi and Fort Kochi in particular is been a famous tourist destination which never had a very strong arts background. They always had these smaller galleries there who were not commercially viable, because the big galleries were always in cities like Bombay and New Delhi or Calcutta, a few of them. With Kochi coming in and then doing this Biennale every 2 years, they always assign it to one or the other artist to sort of pick up the whole bunch of artists to do this thing. So I think, an artist always understand. I just feel that they're very nice, good as an option to be on a selecting committee to select what needs to be shown at a Biennale. So this year we had Jitesh, and the show was wonderful. I did not go to the last one. It has its own problems. Till the last day, things are not in order, things go crazy. It takes about 2 weeks after the opening of the show for things to become normal. But if you come and see the show, there's still 2 weeks more to go. I think we went there for 4 days and it was beautiful. There's a certain lovely flow to the whole show. In 2 days you can cover it up. It's like mini Venice, but problem with Venice is that there's so much information that you're always having tablets of headache every day in the evening after looking at so much art, and then you sleep, and the next day in the morning you get up again and then you walk the whole day. But Kochi it's really very nice. Anybody who's not been there now, I would highly recommend this time or the next time to do it. It's absolutely fantastic. From Shinshin Jen to lots and lots of other artists, Dayanita Singh, lots and lots of European artists. Beautiful flow there's to the whole show. So if you enter and follow that entire path that they've made out to be, I think it's world class. I'm not boasting because it's happening in India and I'm an Indian, but I think anybody who's not done it is something to look forward to for sure.
Alan, I know you did something very generous, maybe not too recently, but quite recently, is you donated some work to M+. As a collector, what prompted you to, give away part of your collection to the public?
The work I donated to M+ was Tino Segal. So for those of you that know his work, it really is something that need to be seen and experienced. And I kind of feel that I'm not doing the artist a great service by keeping it to myself. And of course, everything is virtual. I mean, there's no photo, there's no video, so it's not even something, one can look at, right? It really should be experienced by the public. And actually, even until this point, I mean, he's shown in Beijing recently and in UCCA, but he hasn't really brought his works that much to Asia. So, I thought it would be fantastic if an institution like M+ would be excited about taking it, and they are. So, I think that's how we make it happen. But we did go through quite a process to make sure that it is something that's fitting for Hong Kong, because again, for those of you that know Tino's practice, a lot of those are based on conversation, like what is progress and all that, right? So we try to stay away from that, because we don't exactly know how that would get grounded in Hong Kong, whether we're going to do it in English or Cantonese or Mandarin, right? So we try to do something that is much more physical. So the work that is in the M+ collection right now, it's called Two Guards Kissing. So when you walk into a room, there'll be two museum guards that I assume they are going to be actually museum guards as well while they're doing the show. And when an audience walks into the room, you activate the work and they'll start kissing.
It makes it uncomfortable for the other.
It makes it, and it will be very interesting. You can imagine all the different all the different permutations that they can actually do with it. A man and a woman, two men, two women, an older person, a younger person, interracial. So a lot of possibilities. So
it's a matter of chance that a work like this has sort of got into, because as you said, language is not an issue with this work at all. So that's the reason why it's sort of you feel that it fits in very well to M+. Yeah,
that's right. And it's a little bit of challenge to the art scene in Hong Kong. I look forward to see how courageous M+ will be and what sort of combination would they come up with.
I wonder if that would be in the job application. This is a very interesting segue into the topic of today's conversation, which is trans-Pacific collecting. I mean, obviously, what we just talked about is it's not. it depends on how you interpret it. The artist is definitely not from this region. And in a way, I think, is it possible nowadays to even define art or collecting within a region or within a geographic context? Maybe I'll direct this question to Phillip.
Well, it was an interesting question that William asked earlier. He asked me if I'd ever collected a Hong Kong artist. I had to think about it for a while, and then I said, well, Paul Chan. But Paul Chan was born in Hong Kong, but left I think at the age of 2 with his parents and moved to the US. And it does really, pose this question. Well, what Paul Chan does that have a relationship to Hong Kong? I mean, I would say it does, even though he didn't grow up here, because I think there's some element in there that comes out of this place, and so I think it's very interesting, this question. And look, I've also thought recently of the artists I've been interested in collecting. There've often been people that have come from more than one place. So another artist we were talking about was Haegyu Yang, who obviously comes from Korea, but has been based in Berlin for such a long time that she's really very much part of that Berlin scene. And so I'm often very attracted to artists that don't come from one single place or don't have one single national identity.
And just thinking about artists in that category, right? So Haegyu and Yan Vo, right? So again, born in Vietnam, right? And then moved to Denmark and based in Berlin. So very much a global citizen, right? So but Asian, I guess, right? So it's very interesting that I think right now there's a huge group of artists like that had very diverse background in terms of where they lived and where they were brought up. So I think even thinking about trans-Pacific collecting, I mean, there is that category that would be in the sort of gray zone, and then of course there would be like the more traditional people that are not in Asia specifically, and I think even then, I mean, if you look at the fair right now, I mean, you can see, yes, there's a lot of Asian artists, but I think galleries have been quite bold, I would say, right, in bringing a lot of work from other parts of the world, artists that have always been very well known, but really they're trying to introduce that to Asia for the first time.
For me, I think collecting, there are different ways of collecting, and building a private collection is very, very different from what a museum should collect, though we always try and follow, say, oh, Tate bought that work and I should look at that artist. It always happens like that, but I think being a private collector, if you're collecting for your own self, you are at liberty to really look at any direction in any space that you want to enter to, and then it's all the time people ask me this question, and I always say a private collection has to be half you and half the artist. It's very, very important that you make a collection which is distinctively you. It has to be reflective of, if you do a show in a certain space, the works on the wall, people who know Anurag, even if Anurag is not in the room, they should definitely feel that it's part of him. That is something we all try and miss too. So that's the reason me collecting or looking at art as a private person, it becomes very easy for me to not be very specific to a certain region, because museum as a space can have an obligation, like looking at an Indian museum necessarily to keep looking at Indian artists to sort of support them and support the local culture or something. We have nothing like that to do. We are free birds. We can go travel any direction, see what connects well, more like a web, certain areas, certain issues that overlap between artists, certain particular specific, gender-specific roles, age-specific artists collecting on conversations that are happening in, let's say, Lebanon, then what's happening in Pakistan, or what's happening in India, anywhere. So that makes you very free to collect as you want to collect, and I think that's very exciting when you are collecting as a private person. So I don't think I never even think before looking at an artist saying that he or her comes from a certain region. It is not a question to be considered at all.
That's interesting, because I think even this morning, you were talking about actually in a way collecting it, and it's almost like conversation with artists and with among people that that have the common interest. And I think even this morning, just with our brief conversation, we might not know each other very well, but then you mentioned the artist, and it's like I have an impression of who you're like, and so in a way, I think, how do you all feel about, in a way, this collecting put you in a different group of people with common interest, or you feel that maybe, so does it segment you into a smaller group of people, or does it bring you into a larger context? And maybe Phillip, you can answer this first.
Well, obviously, yes. No, I think it brings you into a larger context because it allows certain points that you can start to discuss, I guess. And, to go back to that Paul Chan question, I think that's a really interesting question because I think that you both said that you were interested in the artist but hadn't necessarily collected that artist. But oh, you do? Oh, sorry. I was. So it already starts, and then you would say, well, which and what and why, and so I think it very much they become points for conversation here.
And I think because around a couple of themes, all these artists are in some way exploring different ideas, right? So, William, you will know that I like text and language, and if you think about the works of the Chinese, like the Xubings, but if you also think a little bit about what John Baldessari has been doing for many, many years, I think that can actually have an interesting dialogue, right? So I think broadening that, I think to your point, I'm trying to create a conversation, with the artists and also within that collection, right?
Yeah. Even I try and do that. If it's possible to me to financially take it forward, it's always vertical collecting and then overlaps between them. So it's always like the whole collection is like a big web, and then you're trying to create smaller webs in it so that people are sort of always having a conversation with each other in terms of the artist. There's always a conversation, dialogue that's happening. So that's why I've always considered and consider mid-career artists as an option to collect. So it's always 1960s younger artists, mid-career artists, not very young artists, but so that they're always, all these artists in a certain age group are always running around and touching on similar issues because we all live through the same problems, and somehow it comes out in the art. So there's always a very nice story that a narrative that's created between all the works that you sort of collect, and you can literally map it. Your own moods is how you sort of land up collecting art. I've sensed it myself. When you're going through a very difficult time in life, things that could be not very taxing on your mind, but visually very appealing and beautiful can be more attractive to you at that moment when you want to collect. It's always phases that you go through. It's really, really like a journey, when you're sort of very free from work, the stress levels are very low, then you want to spend more and more time looking at more challenging work, more interesting art where you can spend more time looking at. So there's always phases. You can really map your own life with the way you've collected all your life. If you can constantly do it, yes, you can do it.
I think challenging is a very interesting word. Art, I think to a lot of people, art, shouldn't that make you feel good? Why would you want to spend money on something that challenges you?
Why not? There are certain issues, maybe, things that you believe in, political issues that you feel that are maybe your friends are going through or you are going through, and it's a challenge that you want to find your way out, and then there are things that come out in terms of art forms that you want to support. So you do it for the sake of it. It's almost like that. They may not be visually very beautiful things, but then you want to buy them and collect them because you believe in those issues and you want to support them and take them forward, and that's how it is. It's my way of doing it and saying it that I'm part of it. I'm part of that struggle that's happening. So why not? It's my way of contributing to it.
Yes, I think that's a very important part of collecting contemporary art, is that there is a patron relationship, I guess, because you say, I really think what that artist is doing is really interesting, and that's where I think that the whole art infrastructure of the importance of galleries and how that whole process works, because I think. Look, I don't buy any work at auction at all because I think it's really important to have that relationship with the producer of the art. And so sometimes that relationship is not not always easy, as you say. It's not just an object in the distance. It's an ongoing relationship which has a conversation to it, and that's what's exciting. So sometimes if it's challenging, it makes that process more exciting.
So it seems like collecting goes beyond just finding something for the wall, but it really is. It seems like it is, reaching out to almost be with the community, and what you're doing could have an influence on the greater good. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, I think, think about collecting as a bit of a disease, but also for me it's also a bit of obligation. I think sitting here in Hong Kong in a broader context of what's happening in Asia and in China, I almost feel an obligation to collect at least my version of history. I mean, I'm not a historian, right? But I think there's so many interesting artists and questions that they're actually posing. A lot of those are challenging ones, honestly speaking, when it comes to China. And I almost feel there's an obligation to actually collect that. And, I think hopefully then people can look back 20 years from now and say, well, that really is a part of what happened in our part of the world, right?
That's how it is, because to me also when I collect, there's always... I have never bought anything at auctions. Gallery is the only way for me to look and consider art. I should not be saying this at the fair. But that's how it is, it's always the relationship that I build up with the gallery and then maybe with the artist. So I have some of the gallery friends here who are sitting here. There's Prateek sitting here from Experimenter. I have other people who are sitting here. They know me and they know how irritating I can be with my questions. They're like love letters, long emails with the non-stop questions. And most of the galleries, they can have the patience to handle me. But some just drop off, on the way because they're like, Anurag just talks too much. He's just asking too many questions and this bloody work costs only $10,000. So why waste time on it,
That's also a filtering process. I think in the same way that you look for artists that resonate, where the works resonate with you, you also look for gallerists.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Where you feel more comfortable. With, right? Yes, absolutely. It's always over dinners, over food in their house with the artist. It's life, It's not only just walking into a fair and say, oh, what a beautiful work of art. And I think it'll look very nice because I have a 8 by 10 feet size wall at home, so if it's there, it doesn't work like that at all. No.
So what's the most satisfying experience you have with collecting?
I think it's the conversations, and I must admit this, that there are not many Indian galleries who do this, but certain Western galleries, and it's really the conversations that are very satisfying. I have to say this, there are lots and lots of galleries who spend a lot of time with me explaining to me, and that's my way of learning history. I understand history and history of art through these galleries. Some of them are sitting here, and it's wonderful that they are able to give me that kind of time. And that's why I sort of feel not obligated to collect that artist, but maybe I feel that this relationship needs to be developed further because of the time that the gallery is able to give me. It's I've been to Gisela Capitan's gallery in Cologne. The moment I went there, Regina is sitting here. I entered that room. All the artists, there were like 8 or 10 artists who I was having a conversation with. It was last year I went there over summer. The viewing room had all the works that she wanted me to see with catalog, books, everything on the table. And she was talking the whole day and I was only listening to the conversation. So it's wonderful,
like how for you.
Yes, exactly. So if they are able to give you that kind of time and they have the patience, you feel you need to connect with these kind of people who are really, really serious with what they're doing. You always learn more and you get back more from them than you're giving it back to them. So it's always like a student, If you have a very nice tutor or a teacher, you're always sort of more attractive to be going up to them. And it's wonderful. And that's why the connection, it's like threads, They're connected to you in some way, but from where you really don't know.
So Alan, do you feel that you're concerned about the value of the artist or the appreciation of the artwork when you look into buying?
Yeah, I think we briefly chat about this. I'm much more concerned that, not so much the appreciation, but I'm much more concerned if an artist stopped practicing, right? Because then I think
That's a big problem.
It does have, obviously there is a value implication of it, but it also means that it's in some way, I mean, something has gone wrong. Either he or she didn't find it to be a sustainable profession for themselves, or they just lost the creativity and the drive to create. And I think that's the most, you're talking about what's the most satisfying, that would be the most unsatisfying elements of collecting, which is sometimes you do buy works of artists who they just evaporate, right? And that's sad, right?
And the difficult part here becomes where people who lose the most are the very young artists. If I say that we are the people who are collecting art, if we start considering mid-career artists as the base level to start looking at art, the younger artists we don't want to collect because of the fear. The values of artworks have become so expensive now that you want to ensure that, okay, if they don't increase in value, at least it's serious art. I don't want any of you to walk into my house and say what shitload this guy has. It's as simple as that. So it comes with a certain amount of respect that you're looking for, and that's the reason the very young artists who you feel they may not remain as artists and change professions, which has happened in India with so many artists because the contemporary market went bust. It's just gone bust completely. So many of the younger artists are not artists anymore. They're working in creative industries. They're doing other things. So people who've collected that kind of art, I don't know what the hell are they going to do with it, So, and that's a big disadvantage to a very young artist who's planning to become a very serious artist over time, because you don't look at them very seriously when we should. That's how it is, yeah.
But I don't know what's worse, and maybe I can direct this to Phillip. An artist who kind of gave up mid-career, or an artist that got tempted by the market and started churning out this work that is really not good. So which one would be worse?
Look, I think probably giving up is the harder outcome. I think art history is, I guess, full of figures who have possibly done their best work in earlier in their career. It doesn't always happen that way, but it's not an uncommon thing. If you look back through 1,000 years of art history, it's often the case. It's not that the artist wants to do that, but it's how we see it in retrospect. It's often they've done something new at the beginning of their career, and that's the thing that we remember them for. But to go back to your question about commercial value, I guess what I'm usually most interested in is that the artist becomes important, or the work that the artist does becomes important. And I guess I value that much more than the dollar value that might... the dollar value feels good at the end of the day, I guess, but it's that fact that they've become important, or that work's become important, that I think gives me the most... the best feeling out of this process, yeah.
But between the two questions that you just raised, I think, which is very difficult, just reflecting on that, I'd much rather choose the first one, which is artists who stop creating, rather than artists who just decided to create the same stuff over and over again, because the second one, you can't unproduce. It's out there, and they're probably destroying the market, and it's horrible to think that, they stop being creative and coming up with new things. And at least in the first one, they might come back. And I'm just, because the reason why I thought of that is Paul Chan, we just talked about Paul Chan, he actually stopped creating for a couple of years, right? He said, okay, well, I've had enough, and I just need a break, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to write. So he started his online publishing business, and he did something completely different, right? And when he comes back, very strong into documenta and all that. So at least in the first category, there's still a chance that they might come back in a meaningful way.
But to me also it happens, when I realize or I come to know that an artist has become super hot, I just lose interest. I seriously lose interest. I don't know. They are artists that we've had at home and they've become super hot over time. That's a different thing. But to consider an artist to collect at the time when they are really, really sought after and they're churning works, no interest. Really no interest at all.
Actually, I've been reading quite a number of artists' biographies. And I read Van Gogh, and then I read Gauguin's writing, and then I also read Andy Warhol's. It was a chore to go through 1,000 pages of his diary. And it seems like all these artists at the time, I think what you see most of what they were thinking about was really how to get somebody to, how to sell more work so that they can actually sustain a lifestyle, and which I think is very interesting. In retrospect, they are all geniuses, but at the time, you know, in a way, it's something that you never leave somebody, an artist's mind, is how do you sell another work? I think as collectors, how do you react to that? And does it also never leave your mind, how do you buy the next work? Philip, Peter? I mean, sorry, it's too early in the morning. Philip, yeah.
So just give me that question again. Like, how do...
Like, it seems like artists, you know, even very important artists, seems like during their lifetime, a lot of their thinking is how do they sell another work. So is it something that you feel is a crucial part of what artists think about? And the next question is, do you think of how do you buy the next work?
Well, I guess you just mentioned Andy Warhol. I mean, for my look, obviously it's not an area I collect. I'm completely out of that league. But you know, to me, his early work, the '60s work, is the work I really value. But that's what I find most interesting. But he had to keep making work because, again, it's like a disease. He has to keep making things. And
like collectors have to keep buying.
Absolutely. So, you know, to say he's doing it, you know, I don't think it's commercially driven. It's just a need to keep making that work. But you can also look at his later work and say, well, you know, there's a whole lot, it's been very influential as well in a different kind of way. And like Jeff Koons, I always think is a kind of child of the later Warhol. He's not a child of the early Warhol. So you know, the various stages of an artist like that have spawned whole lots of different other forms of art and influenced so many other artists. So the fact that he kept making work, you know, later work, which I don't think is so interesting, but other people do, and then it's, you know, prompted a whole lots of other work, you know. So to go back to your question, you know, I think it's better that he kept making work rather than stopped with the early work, which I personally prefer.
I think as you know, curators and collectors, they can also see whether works are still authentic, right? I think I would assume that when artists start to create, it's really authentic in that it comes from them, right? It draws on the part of their history and their life, right? And when they keep churning out the same thing, maybe in different permutation, I think at some point it doesn't become, it become not authentic, and I think people can tell. And there probably will be still people buying it, but it will be a different class of collector. And then I think you change your, you know, if I can use the word, you change your market that way, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. And the question that you really had is, as the artists keep thinking what kind of work they make, as we collectors keep thinking what we want to buy. Exactly. I mean, I frankly admit that I have a list in my pocket which says in the next 2 years who I want to buy, and then map plotting saying how do I propose this installment plan to the gallery, because it's always a problem. You know, say, oh, it costs that much, and then okay, can I have a year to pay it for, or can I have 6 months to pay it for? That's how it is, you know. So it's always in your mind. You're always making your own connections and the webs that I keep saying all the time again and again. So it's always in your mind exactly how the artist thinks that what he or she wants to make. Yes, you're walking on a certain path and you find something in between which is very interesting and you sort of pick it up on the way, but that's rare. There's always a direction that you're following. It's always in your mind. Yes, it is.
Back to the issue of Trans-Pacific and the fact that, you know, I think this week has been probably one of the biggest art week for Asia. I could, you know, proudly say that, you know, the Hong Kong is now almost become, you know, a very important place in Asia because of Art Basel. How do you feel that an event like this can, you know, can change the the importance of the art scene in Asia in a worldwide context, Phillip?
Well, I guess art fairs like Biennales bring people together, and I think that that's the main thing that changes things, because it makes people look outside their city and it brings lots of other people into a city. And so I think that that's the really exciting thing. And, because both Biennales and art fairs are events that people want to go to. They have a kind of a life of their own, and they tend to start to create other events around them. And so it's been fantastic just to go around town and see Parasite yesterday, and so all those, all the Asia Art Archive. So it's the parallel events, I think, that become as important as so the art fair becomes a catalyst for a whole lot of other things.
I think it does catalyze the market, but it did take time, right? I remember people asked me this question 2-3 years ago, which is, well, Art Basel is in Hong Kong, so does that give more opportunity to local artists, right? And at least my observation 2-3 years ago was, everyone come in and ask, so what's a cool artist in Hong Kong that I should watch out? And they would write down the name, but when there's, and excuse me if they're all here, I think they are here. So, if they're at the Gagosian and the White Caves and they're putting up fantastic artists here and there's so much to see at the art fair, the Hong Kong artists don't get the attention. They remain names in a notebook, right? But I do think that's changed. I think that was 2-3 years ago, but now I think there's a much more conscious decision to include local artists into either group shows or even some solo presentations. And I do think Hong Kong artists are getting a lot of attention, as you can see from the BMW prize just now. 2 of the 3 shortlisted artists are from Hong Kong. So I do think it will change. I mean, but it is a journey. So I'm sure next year will become even better.
There is a certain amount of energy whenever an art fair, something like Basel, that takes place in a city like Hong Kong. There are parallel shows that happen around in the museums, in the galleries. So there's a certain amount of extra energy that flows in. But I still think all the art fairs, we need to sit together and spread this aspect of looking, and I'm not saying collecting, but just looking and enjoying art to a whole variety of generation of people, starting from school children to college going students to everybody, which we don't do. We always have VVIP and the VIP openings happening. I still think there should be, the fairs should be extended for 2 days for absolutely getting all the school children, walk through the fairs, look at the stuff, look at what art looks like, so that it grows with them organically as they age. Because I started looking and considering art when I was 27. I didn't know what art was before that. So I think that's something we all need to do. There has to be a certain amount of, we are all talking about a certain echelon of people who are into the business, into the way of looking, collecting, buying, working, making art. This whole aspect needs to spread. It needs to follow down, and then only I think the real good art will come out with time. It's very, very important.
Do you feel art needs to be owned, or?
Absolutely. To live well, yes, absolutely. It's something, it's a genuine emotion that comes out from an artist. If there's a good work, I don't say there's always, every work of art is not necessarily good. There's good and bad work of art, but I think for sanity's sake, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful way of living in life. There's nothing better. You cannot, at least to me, it's the greatest pleasure that you can ever assign in anything that you ever do, is living with art. Really, it is.
Alan, how do you solve that issue when space in Hong Kong is so limited? Does it become irrational when you start just buying and putting in storage?
It is always a consideration, right? The practicality of space in Hong Kong. And I actually had 2 groups coming to my studio yesterday, and it is there's 2 impacts, right? One is the work that you collect, and again, I'm talking a little bit about the local scene here. Artists don't have the studios to produce big works, so you don't see a lot of big sculptures and sculptors in Hong Kong, right? So therefore, the work that they create is different. But I do think that also, drive them towards a different kind of creativity and different kind of work that they create, right? So good and bad, right? But for collectors, I mean, you are constrained by how much space you own, and I'm pretty just on the verge of, I'm always on the line, like, what is the biggest possible work that I can buy that still kind of fit in? I do have the problem right now of having works that just sit unfortunately permanently in warehouse, but hopefully hopefully that so I know where the line is, and I'm trying to not cross it.
Phillip, what do you see as your collection? Where do you want to leave it eventually?
Look, I don't really know at all. That's an interesting question, because at this stage I'm still thinking about growing it. And look, I think there is a Rubicon you cross when you can no longer, have in your own house all the work that you have. But once you cross that Rubicon, I think you don't stop after that. But no, I really haven't worked that out. It's a question, really.
There's certain things that you should absolutely leave unanswered. These things find their own life. They do with time. You don't necessarily, I don't think one needs to sort of necessarily plan to say that, okay, in 20 years' time, this is what's going to happen to the collection. Of course, with the number of works we buy, as he said, we have an issue of storage as well. 3 years ago, we had to build our own storage where we live, because space is not that much of a constraint. So in our office space, we build our own storage, because my wife was like, either you live in this house or all this lives in this house. Please find your way out. So I was like, okay, we build a storage. So that happened. But then, to plan with what's going to happen with the collection, I think there's certain things that need to be left to God. I think you should leave them. Yeah.
Brilliant. So for people that are just curious about buying their first artwork, what would be your advice for them, Phillip?
Well, I think it's, as Anurag said earlier, find yourself a gallerist who will talk to you. And I think that's the first point. And then, it's always been my interest in then trying to get the gallerist to introduce me to the artist. Now, some gallerists are keen on that, some are less keen. But, and it, depends on the pragmatic situation. But really, find the gallerist. And start that conversation.
I totally agree with what he says. You have to find your connection somewhere, because you need something to hold on to. So, you need to find somebody whose hands you can hold, and then take it from there. So even if you don't buy necessarily your first work of art from that gallery, he or she will definitely be able to guide you in the direction to say, okay, you're looking at a younger lot of artists to consider. So I think another gallery is very, very nice. And then that's how the connection flows, because it's a small world, People always know each other very, very well. So I think it's starting from the point of a gallery is a very, very nice option for a person who wants to consider buying first work of art. I would just not recommend walk into anywhere and just buy anything. It makes no sense. Absolutely.
And I think I had a similar experience as well, which is, I remember one of the first artists I want to buy is actually Chao Fei. So I remember going online and researching and just finding Vitamin. And I met up with Zhang Wei and Hu Fang, and they actually didn't have that particular work. But, then I got to know them and, learn a ton from them. And I actually didn't buy from them for the next 2 years, because there just isn't the right work, right? But actually that is the journey, that is the process, and I think sometimes finding that person, that gallerist, that sort of mentor to you is very important.
And on the way you also find people and things like that there's certain, it's business for many of them, and they are not very interested, because when the Indian contemporary art market is completely heated up, I've had galleries who turn around and say, Anurag, we have a long waiting list, so you're going to be there for third year or fourth year, and that's when your number is going to come to look at something. I'm like, and then I've had certain galleries, which I should admit and say this here, saying that, Anurag, we sell this kind of work and this particular artist to people who buy every month from us. I'm like, every month? How does one buy art every month from somebody? But these are the perils of market and market forces, and that's how it is, yes. So, when you start a conversation with a certain person, you always will realize who is the right and the wrong person to be dealing with. And that's the path that you sort of walk onto.
Well, it seems like a lot of the conversation really surround, kind of finding a good gallery that, you can really trust, and you can, really get to know more about the artwork. And maybe this is a good time for us to involve the audience. I think a lot of good galleries are here, as you can spot some of them. would any gallery like to make some comment on maybe some of the people that have bought from you that's sitting here? Can I encourage? Yes, a good question.
Hi, I'm Pratik Raja from Experimenter. William and I know each other, and Anurag and I know each other from the very beginning of the gallery.
Maybe, excuse me, would you like to? Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, I'm standing up. So, when we started the gallery, maybe 6 years now, Anurag was one of our first supporters, and we now spend so much time talking to each other, not necessarily about gallery artists, not necessarily about works that we are wanting to show, or we talk about everything. And I think that relationship and that journey that has happened from not knowing each other at all, and then being able to share things that only a few people know in terms of will be able to relate to what we're talking about, is very special. So a gallery's role is not necessarily about only a commercial relationship. And I think collectors, as deeply involved as Anurag is, with the artists that he follows over time, those relationships become very, very, very critical and important. And it's a journey as equally pleasurable for us, and I think maybe for him as well. So we spend time talking till 4 o'clock in the morning at my home, sitting and eating like multiple.
This has happened 3 weeks ago. We were at his house and I was having dinner, and he and his wife together, and they're sitting and doubting the model of gallery, whether it'll survive or not, and how it's changing over time. And I'm fighting for them to say that the gallery will survive. I'm like, why am I doing this? They own the gallery. They are doubting. And it always happens, when you're intelligent, you always doubt yourself. It's always like that. And this whole
why do I always doubt myself?
So you admit you're intelligent. So that's how it was, it's always with them. That's kind of, I walked onto the gallery for the first time. The artist Naeem Mohammed from Bangladesh, he was there by chance. The moment I saw his art, and I was like, Pratik, would you like to come to dinner with me? And he's like, no, the two of you can go together. I don't want to be part of this right now. I spent 2 hours with that artist over dinner, and it's been a long journey since then. Multiple works of art, collected him in depth, beautiful friends. It's really, it's become part of your life. It's as simple as that, yes?
Well, actually, I'm very glad Pratik raised his hands, because you're one gallery that I thought of, because I didn't know you until last year when you were here, maybe for the first time. You did an excellent display, and I think the artist ended up winning the Best Artist Award for the fair. And actually, also, the artist is not from your country. The artist is a European artist. That makes me think about really this notion of, art really is it really becoming, really pulling together? It's crossing any geographic border. It seems like, I collected a piece of art from an Indian gallery that's featuring an artist from Europe, and on a subject matter that's about Berlin. And I think it's really amazing how all these things start to connect together. The other time I got a piece of work from Yan Vo, who is, of course, an artist born in Vietnam and living in Belgium. And then the work was actually about this missionary that lived in Macau. It's a Spanish missionary living in Macau, and he somehow spent a few days in Hong Kong, So it's really amazing how art seems to be gelling these things together. And yesterday, well, actually, I don't know where I heard something about, really using art as a way to solve some of these geographic problems. I know this year at the Venice Biennial, they're going to put an Indian artist and a Pakistani artist together.
We've done that before as well. We've had a India-Pakistan pavilion together, and I think it's a lovely way to sort of love each other, I would say.
So maybe, before I open it, the conversation to everyone, so maybe on closing, maybe I can have everyone express, your idea of, what is this power of art that can really do to the world? Phillip?
Well, as I say, I think it just comes back to this conversation question, and that's where things change, I guess. And look, I find myself in the same position sometimes of, buying from a gallery in Berlin with an artist that's based in New York or something, and I think that's that's a relatively new thing. I think that I guess small to medium galleries are now representing outside their geographical area, and I think that's really exciting too, because it allows those ideas to spread more and more.
Maybe it's too grand a statement to make, but we had the Olympics on the sports side bringing the world together. I mean, there's no reason why art is not doing that, and it is doing that, right? I mean, by asking the right question, by posing all those challenging thoughts into the work. So, I can certainly see that as a very interesting role that art can do and mediate what's happening around the world.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of intellect that involves with art, and that's the reason I think certain people step back and don't come forward. We need to sort of, stop looking and considering art on only plain white walls. It needs to enter homes. It needs to enter homes of lower middle class people. It needs to just spread. And the moment it spreads, I think it'll be a very beautiful way to live with each other. I think everybody, everything, there are certain nice emotions that come out with most of the artworks that you tend to sort of live with. And if there's positive energy around where you are, it's somehow going to reflect in your work. People around you, your conversations, your lifestyle, your children, it's going to make a difference. It's like a positive way of living. It's as simple as that, yeah.
Well, actually, the other day I listened to the talk by Susan Sarandon, and she was talking about the movie Birdman. And it seems like at the time, no big Hollywood producer would want to do a movie like that. And it takes like a small, independent studio to then, want to do something like that. And it seems like maybe for art, it's also the case that maybe if you have some very good starting young artists, that it might be very difficult for them to make it into working with like very huge gallery. And seems like the art, like smaller galleries is one way for them to break through. And also maybe, in something like the discovery section of the art fair is really where these artists can really get their first big break. Do you agree to that?
Yes, very much so. And, to go back to your original question about if you were to buy your first piece, I think it's probably, although it might seem to be a bit of a jump into the unknown, but why not go to one of those discovery galleries? Because they're kind of like, the work should be probably a bit more, affordable. You can afford to, take a bit of a risk. And they're the kind of people that will be able to tell you about the work. And, so they're often the best place to start as a collector, because they're the people that have got a relatively new artist that they're very excited about, and they want to talk about that excitement.
And the artists are also probably trying to do their best to, really have make use of the opportunity to show their work.
It does give them a platform, I think, a certain step that they come back onto, and it becomes a level field for them, for others who may not have actually seen the work, to see it at the discovery sections. Of course, it is an advantage, but at the end of the day, 10 years down the line, it's the art that's going to talk about it, nothing else. I mean,
would you like to say something, Alan, or?
No, I think that's why having independent spaces are also very important, right? Because you can't just have large museum institutions, right? So platforms like Parasite and 1A and Videotage in Hong Kong are all very important platforms for young artists. Even sometimes before they get to institution or even fairs, right? To have the chance to show for people to actually have the chance to see and experience it, right?
But I would also say Biennales are very important. They provide a similar process because you often get a whole range of artists through different parts of their career, and you can often see, it's often where I see artists for the first time.
Okay, so I think maybe, now I would like to open the discussion to the audience. Do you mind if we turn on a little bit more light?
Well, hi, good morning. My name is Fernando. I live in Hong Kong. I'm Spanish. I have a large collection of European and Latin American art, which partly is a family inheritance. And I'm trying to kind of balance that as a collector with Asian art and with more kind of a global kind of scale. And when I talk to the galleries back in Spain, and you only see one here, I think, so that's an example of how maybe short-minded or how conservative or how scared or whatever it is, their business model right now is just definitely not working for me. So I'm trying to look for galleries outside, and obviously I come here, and some of the galleries are very established, so I'm trying to, a little bit beyond my kind of level. So I'm trying to figure out, how do you guys manage that when you have an extremely kind of localized type of art, which is kind of contextualized to your, to where you're from and where you've lived most of your life? How do you actually expand from that and build a bit more of a global collection? And the second question was more about technology. Yesterday I was taking pictures, like most of us do here, and I shared it on Facebook. And a lot of my friends kind of said, oh, very interesting. And one guy said, an Italian guy living in London, a very good friend of mine, said, how much would you like for that? And I said, well, I actually haven't bought it yet. And it's kind of started thinking like, as a business, I could just kind of almost do the trade right there, although it wasn't my intention, but you know what I mean. There's this interest in the way technology may actually enhance the way that kind of collections become more global. And so what is your experience I'm more interested in the first question, probably it's a bit more. Thank you.
Who would like to answer?
Do I? To me, when you're talking about taking the next step forward, as into the centric specific collection that you have, to taking it outside, make it into transatlantic or anywhere else, I think first thing is try and study the issues, aspects, emotions that the artists that you already have are already talking about. And you'll have overlaps coming from that to artists that is happening maybe in Asia or Southeast Asia or America or Europe or somewhere. And that's the first step you should do. If you find one artist who's having parallel conversation, who you believe a lot in, to another one that's happening outside somewhere, that's the bridge I would say walk first to. And from there you'll get your other connections.
Actually, quite a few of my artists are dead.
Then maybe start from looking at the younger lot of artists from there.
But I get the point. The emotions are similar, and maybe the transition.
Because I think that's a common thread that binds all of us together, irrespective of where we live. It's emotions, yes, they do.
And maybe not so much an answer, but I'm fascinated by the second point around maybe you can create a virtual gallery or dealer, because you go Instagram the art world and people go ask you, where can I buy that? I was just reading the other day that DiCaprio apparently buy art through Instagram, right? So he would see stuff on Instagram and he'll Google them and then he'll go call up the dealer and say, I want that, right? So he's apparently bought that way. And what I guess the answer I would have for you is, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, why do you need to see it physically? I mean, you've got to have a starting point. You don't pick up a physical newspaper to get news. You go online and you read stuff, and it's a perfectly legit way to get information, right? So, I don't know how you want to expand, but certainly, there's a lot of things that goes around, and presumably people that you're connected to, whether it's on Instagram and Facebook, are people that are your friends and that you share a common interest, and whatever they post is probably not a bad place to start.
Yeah, but the paintings can be very deceptive. That's my feeling completely. I mean, you can buy photography like that very easily, sculptures very easily. Paintings are very deceptive. You need to see them in person. I would highly recommend anybody looking at expensive art, and especially paintings, because painting anyways is such a tradable medium that it tends to become more expensive than other mediums irrespective. So if you're looking at that, I would highly recommend see it once somewhere before you sort of commit to something. The images are not exactly how they work. It can be far better than what you see online, and it can fall flat.
Which is what most galleries would tell you. They say, oh, it looks much better when you come to see it.
Actually, maybe I could add to your question is, actually both Alan and myself work on, a very good European galleries collection committee. And I think it probably what your question, the first question is maybe not unlike a European or a London-based museum that wants to expand their collection, let's say, to include Asian art. I think the way they look at it is not necessarily look at things as region or as specific artists, but maybe look at it more as, like what is the commonality between what they have and then what are the areas that they could expand into. I think even like maybe more older or more historic works or more modernist type of work, I think they inform a lot of the contemporary artists in their practice. So in a way, maybe one way is for you to maybe work with a good consultant or gallerist to be able to, advise you on then what are some of the current artists that, use the same kind of thematic approach and then maybe then you can do a very nice link. A lot of collection, like myself, I probably built up a collection of contemporary works, and then I want to now go back and link it to the more the people that inform those works, the previous generation. So maybe what you're trying to do is do the reverse. You have the previous generation, and how do you link that to something more current?
Yes, it's interesting, your challenge, because it's much more like an institutional challenge, because it's what almost every established museum faces, where they've got things that they've been given or that they've accumulated over years, and they've got to suddenly say, well, how do we deal with the present? And so I think it would be good to look to institutions and find who you think does that job best. And
can I take another question?
Thank you for sharing so much abundant experiences in terms of collection or enjoying the artwork. And it's good that you all mentioned that it's a journey. And good that William also asked a question about advices for have the first collection. But I guess no matter if it's for the gallery or collector or even artist, the journey before they can showcase in the fair here or be presented by a gallery in their gallery or in the exhibition, or for the collector to have their first collection. I believe that could be a long journey for all of them. But how if they are at the very beginning of the journey, for a young gallery, a very young artist, a very, very young collector? Are your advices just given apply to them, or actually you have some specific or special advices to those who are at the very, very stage?
I would also think there's always a personal element to this too, and that is you come to this wanting to be involved in this area from having a certain life experience, and so if your life experience has been interested in popular culture, you might be interested in looking at that side of art that is interested in popular culture. So because I think it's very important that at the end of the day that it's not just an intellectual decision, that you feel something about it. So it really depends on your background, I guess, and I think you should use your background. So if your background is, as I say, a kind of popular culture thing, well, make the first purchase in that area, because you're then more likely to engage with it and understand it. So yeah, I think it's really important to take your personal life experience and start there.
I think a dialogue is very essential, because the moment you don't have a connection with what you've collected for the first time, you'll stop doing it after a few years. There has to be a constant reveration with what's happening around you all the time. When at times you live in your home and you have all these artworks around, you don't even see certain works with your eyes every single day. But then there are certain works that you keep want to going back to all the time. So you have certain things. We've had works in the house, bought down after 2 years, sent back to the storage. 3 years back, they're back at home, in your bedroom. So there's something, why do you want it back there after 3 years, 4 years time, when you've collected so much more art, the new stuff? There's something that is keeping that connection with you. So that's very essential, else you'll lose interest. I'm sure you'll lose interest.
Thanks very much for your enlightening comments. I'm an art advisor from Sydney, and I've got 20 years of background in galleries in New York and in Australia. I found that the process of dealing with young collectors in this point of starting anew is very different to what I imagined it would be in terms of working with people who have already experienced or had conversations with galleries, going in, shaking hands, spending time with them. And some of my younger clients who are very interested in art and very culturally aware, who are in their 30s, they don't have the time to really, or they don't feel they can make the time to go into the galleries. So what I tend to do in all my travels around the world at all the fairs, I'm usually somewhere every 6 or 8 weeks, I return to them and give them educational sort of presentations. And I'm sort of interested in your response to the fact that I think that a lot of collecting for the future, still where the value of the galleries I think is really important, because having my experience, I know what that importance is. I think that in our social media world, looking forward, the Instagram, the Facebooking, I feel that there's also an adjustment in how we have to educate people, because they're not necessarily going to go into the galleries and start those long relationships, which are wonderful and very cherished relationships. And I would like to have more of that with my clients, but I think that they are after a deeper and quicker education. I'm just wondering if any of you'd like to respond to that.
Should I say? It's a nice way for people probably to consider and look at things, but to me, it's a way of buying art but not collecting. I'm old world school thought. I still think walking into the gallery space, I'm 39, I still say that. I should not be. I'm part of the virtual world, and that's how I should be collecting as well, but I don't do it. It's a nice way for the younger generation of collectors to sort of buy art, but to build a strong collection, I have sincere doubts that it can happen like that. I may be very, very wrong in 20 years' time. Absolutely.
And I think that perhaps is a future for you as well, right? I mean, as you said, that there will be people that buy art, and there will be people that collect, and people that really want to build a collection will spend the time and the energy to go meet with gallerists, artists, and all that, right?
Yes, my view is it probably depends how quickly the collector wants to engage, and I think that's where you offer an ability to kind of accelerate that process, because I think for people to start right from scratch, it does take a long time, because it does it's a very time-consuming process, and as you say, if someone doesn't have that time or wants to telescope the amount of time that they're spending, it's obviously a process. You can really assist with that process. It's an acceleration process. So that's how I would see it. But I do think it's very important in the end of the day for your clients to engage, because I'm sure you do too.
Can we take another question?
Good morning. My question is quite simple. In this year, Hong Kong Basel, do you meet someone who is competing you for one artwork? And if yes, how you deal with the problem? Thank you.
Alan.
I have not got into the fair, so I can't answer. I'll leave it to these people to do it.
Anyone that competed with me on artwork? Okay. Well, you just need to go there fast, I guess. And you know, I do think that the fair has changed the metabolic rate in which galleries work, and you know, I guess for many of you here, you would know whether you're on the collecting side or on the gallery side that you know the list tends to go out earlier and earlier and earlier, right?
There's a VVVVIP opening.
So you know, this year I think I asked a year before the fair opens, which I think even no, not a year, sorry, a month, and I thought any earlier would be impolite. And then, but apparently when I asked, they said some galleries are already saying, oh, some of the works are reserved already. So I do think the fair is creating an interesting, let's say, the interesting metabolic rate in the whole art world. So just be fast is the answer.
Yes, be fast or go somewhere else. That's what I'd say.
Well, actually, last year, I used to buy Hong Kong artists' work, and it's always there waiting for me because nobody is really that interested in them. Last year, I had a painful experience that I saw this really nice piece of work, and when I asked, it's like, it's gone. Somebody bought it already. And I was shocked because, like, why would anyone else be interested in Hong Kong artists' work? So I think the scene has changed. So this year, I make sure that like Alan was saying, I make sure that, I put a tag on the things that I really like, and maybe I just beat you to yours. We can take another question.
Speak Chinese, okay? 谢谢各位。我的问题是，对于一些欧美的藏家而言，收藏一些中国以及亚洲的艺术，我不知道是依据一个什么样的体系来选择他们的藏品。比如说近100年以来。亚洲和中国和亚洲的国家受了很多西方的影响，有一些作品。那么对于欧美的藏家选择这些作品，是依据自己的艺术史的体系来选择一些中国的和亚洲的艺术呢，还是尊重亚洲本身的历史的发展，来选择他们具有历史地位的和历史转折点的作品？就是我不知道更倾向于什么样的体系，对于欧美的藏家来选择东方的艺术。谢谢。
好，我可以翻译，不过我觉得这个问题可能应该是 Phillip 可以答得最好。我不知道我翻译之后有没有他答了之后有没有人再做一个翻译 ？Would that be any? Okay. Oh, so you don't, because I think you're the best person to answer this question. It's really about Western collectors. When they want to come and look at Asian work, what do you think they should be looking for? Should they expect the work to be really about something they're familiar with, maybe works that have Western influence, or should they be looking for something that really is very authentic to the place, or do you feel that certain artists, do you think that's also in artists' mind when they want to appeal to Western collectors?
Look, I think artists have all kinds of approaches, and obviously it's very hard to generalize. I guess it really depends on the artist and what kind of work they want to do. And I think it's the same for collectors. I think maybe some collectors want to have a geographical spread, so they think they're interested in, they don't have Asian in their collection, so they want to add that. Now that's not my personal view, because as I say, I try to see through to some extent where the artist has an identity in a particular place, but so it really depends on the collector, I think, as well. So it's a bit hard to generalise, so I can only really probably talk for myself, and as I said before, my main interest is in this global art world, and it's the connections across continents that are interesting to me, and I think some Asian artists are interested in that, and that's what I'm interested in. So that's what I would be looking for. Yeah.
Another question, I think the lady over here.
Hi. How do you guys manage offloading certain artworks, be it donating or selling them? Because you've all spoken about pure commerciality rather negatively, but then again, it kind of demands attention. For instance, Anurag talked about artists who are hot and then losing interest. Selling off a work like that could probably afford you 3 emerging artists who you're actually interested in. So how do you negotiate this?
I think that's the best way to do that would be at the right time when the market supports to just auction the work. It's as simple as that. Let the market decide the value of it, and really that money one should, there are certain things, because when you're collecting with the knowledge base that you keep gaining over a long period of time, however good art or artists you may have, you tend to lose connections. It happens. It's like, you're growing as a human being. You might have certain things that you enjoy now at a certain age and time, and then over time you don't. So if those things don't connect to, I think it's a very nice way, and I admit it, I've not done that till now, but ideally you should, because, you don't have unlimited means to keep buying art all the time. Yes, you should sell a few works, and then look at other things that you sort of reverberate or sort of interests you more. I think and there's nothing wrong in doing it. Absolutely. Absolutely not.
Totally agree. So I think people's interests do change. Ideally you start with some ideas of what are the different themes that you want to build around, but when certain things you lost connection with certain artworks or artists, then it's time to pick another one, right?
That's how I had my first connection. I got interested because I was doing up my home, but at the same time when the Indian market was heating up, I bought these 2 works of art. They were my first purchases, and I got a call from the auction house to say, would you want to sell them? And I was like, I just bought them like 6 months ago and somebody wants to buy it. And when you're selling it for like 48 hours over an online auction and you see values going up like that, and when you're like 27, 28, you feel, there's something in your eye, which can get you something or somewhere in the world and make life more interesting for you. And that's how I got interested, frankly. I mean, the commercial aspect was that got me interested. I mean, now it's for the love of it, and you get more and more involved, and you don't want to part with things. They become like your children. But the first step, of course, was the commercial aspect, and I accept it. I admit to it, yes.
So, provided there's somebody interested in buying it. Should we take one more question? Is there one more question? If not, then, is that a question? Or if not, then I think we can close the conversation. And I would very much like to thank our 3 speakers. And thank you for kindly attending this talk at very early in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.